On the night of March 3, 1943, in the middle of the Second World War, 173 people died on a London staircase without a single bomb falling on them. There was no direct hit, no collapsing building, no blazing crater in the street. Instead, in the dim entrance to Bethnal Green Underground Station, men, women, and children were crushed to death in darkness while trying to reach safety. For decades, the full story remained muted, overshadowed by wartime secrecy and the larger narrative of the Blitz. Yet what happened there reveals something unsettling about fear, responsibility, and the fragile line between protection and catastrophe. By 1943, Londoners were used to sirens. Since 1940, the city had endured sustained bombing. The East End in particular had suffered heavily. Bethnal Green, a working-class district of narrow streets and brick terraces, had been hit repeatedly. Families knew the routine when the siren sounded: gather children, grab blankets, move quickly but calmly to the nearest shelter. Many underground stations had become deep refuges from air raids, their platforms lined with bunks and bedding. Bethnal Green Station, however, was not yet operational as a passenger stop. It was unfinished, but it had been converted into an air raid shelter. Thousands could gather on its wide platforms below ground. Shortly after 8 p.m. on that Wednesday evening, the air raid siren began to wail. It was cold, and the streets were wet. People emerged from houses and tenements, some carrying infants, others holding the hands of young children. The entrance to Bethnal Green Station consisted of a single stairway descending steeply from the pavement. There was no central handrail dividing the steps, and lighting was limited. The blackout, enforced to make London harder to target, left the area dim except for shaded lamps. What happened next unfolded in seconds. As families hurried down the stairs, a new sound ripped through the night sky. It was not the whistle of falling bombs, but the unfamiliar roar of anti-aircraft rockets being fired from nearby Victoria Park. Britain had begun testing and deploying a new weapon system, and for many residents, this was the first time they had heard it. The noise was explosive and startling. Some accounts suggest that the sudden blast caused people near the top of the staircase to surge forward. Historians debate the precise trigger. Some records indicate that a woman carrying a child stumbled near the bottom of the stairs. Others suggest someone tripped in the darkness and fell. Evidence remains unclear on the exact first misstep. What is certain is that within moments, people were falling on top of one another. The staircase became a human funnel. Those at the front lost their footing and could not rise. Those behind, unaware of the blockage below, continued descending under pressure from the crowd above. The absence of a central handrail meant there was nothing to break the flow into separate channels. Bodies piled up. In the crush, breathing became impossible. Parents were separated from children. Panic rippled backward, but the force of the crowd was relentless. It lasted only minutes. When order was finally restored and rescuers began pulling people free, the scale of the tragedy emerged. 173 people were dead, most of them women and children. Official figures record that 62% of the dead were children. Many others were injured, some severely. There had been no bomb strike in Bethnal Green that night. The station itself was undamaged. The danger had come not from enemy explosives, but from fear, darkness, and structural vulnerability. Ambulances arrived quickly, ferrying the injured to nearby hospitals. The dead were laid out, identified where possible, and taken away. In the surrounding streets, families searched frantically for missing relatives. The war did not pause. Anti-aircraft guns continued to fire elsewhere in the city. Yet in Bethnal Green, a community had been shattered in a way that was at once public and strangely invisible. The government faced an immediate dilemma. Britain was still at war. Morale was considered a weapon as vital as artillery. News of a mass death in a shelter, caused not by enemy bombs but by a panic on a staircase, risked undermining public confidence. Within days, authorities imposed restrictions on reporting. A brief statement acknowledged a loss of life due to an accident at a shelter entrance, but details were sparse. The role of the new anti-aircraft rockets was not publicized, nor were questions about the design of the staircase widely aired. Some officials privately recognized that the entrance had weaknesses. The lack of a handrail had been noted before. Lighting conditions were poor. The steep, narrow stairway could easily become congested under pressure. After the disaster, modifications were made. A central handrail was installed. Better crowd control measures were introduced at shelters across London. Yet these changes came too late for those who had died. For many years, the event remained in the shadow of larger wartime narratives. The Blitz, the Battle of Britain, D-Day, these dominated public memory. Bethnal Green did not fit the heroic arc. There was no enemy bomber to blame directly, no clear act of aggression to rally against. The deaths were officially described as accidental. Inquests were limited in scope, and a full public inquiry was delayed. Families grieved in private. Some accounts indicate that survivors carried feelings of guilt for decades, replaying the chaos in their minds, wondering if they could have acted differently. Historians caution against oversimplifying these emotions, but the psychological toll was real. Only years later did a more complete picture emerge. In 1946, an inquiry report was completed, but not fully released to the public at the time. It acknowledged that the staircase layout and lack of crowd management contributed significantly to the disaster. It also confirmed that the firing of the new rockets had coincided with the rush to the shelter. The rockets themselves were not inherently defective, but their sudden use in a densely populated area without prior warning likely intensified fear among civilians already conditioned by years of bombing. The Bethnal Green tube disaster raises uncomfortable questions about responsibility. Was it an unavoidable tragedy born of wartime stress, or was it a preventable failure of planning? Historians debate how much weight to assign to each factor. War compresses decision-making. Resources are stretched. Officials balance secrecy against transparency. Yet the physical facts remain stark. A single entrance, a steep staircase, inadequate lighting, and a crowd of civilians seeking safety. In the decades that followed, Bethnal Green changed. The underground station eventually opened to regular passenger service. The war ended. The East End rebuilt. But memory lingered quietly. Survivors and relatives formed associations to preserve the story. They sought recognition not for spectacle, but for acknowledgement. In 2017, a permanent memorial was unveiled near the station entrance. A stainless steel structure forming an inverted staircase, engraved with the names of the 173 victims. It stands not as a monument to military victory or defeat, but to ordinary people caught in a fatal convergence of fear and design. The phrase, "no bomb hit them," captures the haunting nature of the disaster. In wartime London, death from bombing was an ever-present risk, understood and grimly accepted. But death in a place meant for refuge carries a different weight. Bethnal Green was intended to shield civilians from violence above ground. Instead, the shelter entrance became the site of Britain's deadliest civilian disaster of the Second World War. There is a broader lesson here, though it resists simple slogans. The disaster illustrates how infrastructure, human behavior, and policy intersect under pressure. A staircase is not just concrete and brick, it is a channel for movement shaped by assumptions about order and calm. When those assumptions fail, the consequences can be devastating. Wartime urgency magnified the risks, but the underlying issues, crowd management, clear communication, structural design, are timeless. On that March evening in 1943, the siren's cry sent families into the street, as it had many times before. They were doing what they had been told, following instructions meant to keep them alive. In the darkness of the stairwell, history turned not on a bomb's trajectory, but on a stumble, a surge, and the unstoppable force of a frightened crowd. 173 lives ended in a place of supposed safety. Today, trains pass through Bethnal Green as they have for decades. Commuters descend the stairs in routine silence, perhaps unaware of the names etched nearby. The city above hums with traffic and light, no longer blacked out. Yet beneath the ordinary rhythm of urban life lies the memory of a night when fear alone proved lethal. The Bethnal Green tube disaster stands as a solemn reminder that in times of crisis, protection demands not only courage and resolve, but careful thought, humility, and the willingness to confront hard truths, even when no bomb has fallen.